Wheatley, and welcome to episode 122 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us, as usual, wherever you are doing it from, YouTube or the podcast platforms. I want to thank Cleona Byrne for coming on last week. Really interesting chat. A body confidence coach. We talked a lot about obviously confidence in your body and stuff, but all the kind of diet fads and shaming and, you know, the words we kind of use around bodies and, you know, people around us and how it can have lasting effects on us. And Clona was such a enthusiastic person, and she was great. So check her out. We'll have all the stuff on the page on Facebook, on Instagram, all her information to do with her website, stuff like that. So go for it. So my guest today is I'm going to mess this up, is a Gestalt and Emdr therapist, and her name is Rebecca O'Callaghan. How are you doing, Rebecca?
Thank you, Derek.
Did I get it right?
You did. You got it right.
Could you just say it just for clarification?
Gestalt.
There's a bit of it.
I don't know. I might be saying it wrong. It's a German word originally. So
it's. I was looking at it and I was thinking, the first time I wrote it down, this is a bad thing to admit. I left out the T, the first T. So I was saying Gestalt. I was saying that, which is definitely not. It sounds more French actually that way. But we're going to find out what those are, by the way. That's just the wording of it.
To finding out.
Yeah. Well, especially if it's Gestalt, which none of us know what it is. But so Rebecca, we always start in the same place with a short history of your upbringing, please.
So I grew up down the road from where I am now, in South Dublin, and what kind of information are you looking for? Like generally,
to be honest, as little or as much as you want, but basically like where you went to school, what you went through at college, and I guess that's really it normally.
I went to school in Dean's Grange, where I grew up, and secondary school also. I hated school, by the way. Okay. Hated school. And I left Ireland pretty much after school. I started in college, but I was just not able to focus, was not kind of not able to apply myself, as they would say, you know.
Were you like would you describe yourself as like, were you a messer or were you a messer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was definitely a messer, like a bit off the rails.
Okay, all right.
And college was great in fun ways, but I was doing science in UCD the first time round, and you have to do loads of work. Although I loved science at school, when I went to college, it was not interesting at all. It was just very, very a lot of hard work and a lot of details, and I was not ready for that at all. I just wanted to party.
That's fair. So
I dropped out with the support of my parents. They were very good about it, and went off traveling. That was a great time traveling and learning and exploring the world and getting into meditation and getting to know myself kind of from the inside. And then I figured out I wanted to study psychology. I went back to college to do psychology.
Why? How did you? Because I think a lot of people, well, I guess most people, when they get the CAO, it's not what it's called, the CAO form, they don't know what they're going to do. What was it that when you went away made you decide that psychology was the thing?
I actually don't remember. That's a really good question. Right. While I was away, I was learning about meditation and kind of spirituality. I got really into Tibetan Buddhism at that time.
Okay.
And I was really into drugs as well.
Okay.
To be honest about that, was having all these experiences that were kind of opening up my mind, and it just seemed like I was fascinated in the mind and what it means to be human. And somehow I found a book when I was traveling about psychotherapy, and I found it interesting. So I decided to do psychology.
So you genuinely went away and kind of, people always talk about finding themselves and everybody wants to find themselves and stuff, but it's funny that you actually did find something that obviously something that you wanted to do and maybe were not even aware of it at the time, and it's something you found.
As I'm talking about this, I'm actually remembering that I think I already had an idea about doing psychology. Right. I must have put it already down on my CAO form, and I was maybe trying to do it through science the first time. I was planning to do kind of, you can get in back in those days, 20 years ago, you could get into psychology through science. And then in the second year, you would specialize in psychology. I think it was something like this. I think I already knew I was interested in psychology.
Yeah.
I remember reading, my mom, by the way, was a psychologist, a psychotherapist. So there was loads of books in the house, and my parents would talk a lot, and we were always there was conversations about people, I suppose, all the time. And so I was interested, and there was a book. Have you come across Irvin Yalom?
I've heard the name, but I definitely never read any.
Really recommend his novels. Okay. Really, really inspiring novels. So I've read a couple of his novels, and I remember reading them and just going, wow, this is what I want to do. He's a psychotherapist, so he kind of writes novels based on his experiences as a psychotherapist.
We had a neuroscientist on a while back, not too long back actually, Emma Cahill, and she was talking about how she found neuroscience within novels as well. That's kind of interesting because we don't think of, I'd be a big reader, but I don't think of it in terms of like this person is a psychotherapist in real life, and this is how they transfer that kind of knowledge to a novel, which is deadly. It's a great way to find kind of things out. But I found it interesting when Emma brought up, and now that you've bringing it up like a few episodes later, it's interesting for me. So, when did you first become aware of mental health?
I have no idea. Yeah. I have a feeling that I always felt like there was something wrong with me. Very, very young. I always felt there was something wrong with me. And it was many, many years later, decades later, when I started to, it's probably only after I started my own psychotherapy training that I started to identify, all these things, I can identify with all these things. In fact, probably during my psychology degree, there was modules on abnormal psychology, right? And I remember thinking, well, I can identify with all these different conditions, and just feeling very, apologies for the noise, by the way, my kids are upstairs. Just feeling like, yeah, I can identify with all these things.
It's interesting that kind of, and I always end kind of come back on this question because everybody has answered it who's come on, and it's such the answers are so diverse to where we've all, like, depending on our age and demographic, whatever, where we've all kind of come across mental health for the first time. And obviously when I talk to people who are quite young, like maybe 20, 21, they found out about it in school and things like that, maybe on the news. But like what you're telling me from where you found out about it, and I was like 22, 23, maybe but that was from my own mental. It's a really the kind of, I hope that we're going to start finding out more when we're younger and younger, because then we're able to deal with it and able to handle it a bit more. But it's so interesting to hear you talk about it as like you were finding out about it as you were, studying something that you wanted to become a profession and relating to it as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's interesting,
Yeah, it's brilliant that now it's out there in schools and people are talking about it, and because mental health is, should be as commonly talked about as any other kind of health. Everybody has mental health.
Yeah.
And you can be, mentally well at times, and you can be mentally unwell at times, and everything in between,
Yeah, and we need to know, that's another thing that we've talked about on the podcast. There's good mental health and there's bad mental health, and we need to know as well that it's when we talk about mental health, it's not just about when people are really, really suffering. There's also good mental health that we need to figure out why we're feeling good, and to remember that when we are feeling bad, to kind of, that we'll be able to get back to it and stuff. But
yeah,
I wanted to talk to you. I have to say this word again. I've already forgotten. Okay,
Gestalt.
Gestalt. Yes. What is Gestalt therapy, and what attracted you to it?
Okay, so the word Gestalt, I'll tell you what my understanding of what it means. It's a German word, and it means something like form or shape. And the sort of deeper meaning of it in the context of as a therapy is that the Gestalt, the whole of something, is greater than the sum of the parts. Mm-hmm. Right? So when you have a shape, and one of the things that people might be familiar with is there were Gestalt psychologists who were looking into how people perceive, and there's a famous example of an image that would be used, and there's like all these dots on a page, and you look at it and you see, what do you see?
Yeah.
Right? And the way that the dots are all configured, the way our perception works is we see it either as this shape or that shape. And there's a famous one that's kind of an old woman or a young woman, depending on how you see have you come across this at all? It's really interesting. I'll see if I can find it and I'll send it to you. You can put it up on the page or whatever to go with this. But it's that idea that you couldn't tell by any of those dots alone how the configuration is going to make you see this image. You know, the totality makes up something new. And so Gestalt, was a question, what attracted me to it?
Yeah.
So when I was exploring all the different kinds of therapy, I was doing all these kind of taster courses, and I went to this Gestalt taster weekend, and I was blown away by it. I just felt like it was so much more meaningful and kind of incorporated. It sort of woke up so much more of me. I felt so much more present and engaged with the way that it was taught. And partly this was that it was in a training institute that was really good at the time, Metanoia in the UK, and the trainers were amazing. And the whole thing was presented in such a way that like it wasn't out of books. It wasn't about the theory, and they weren't teaching us by, giving us a load of writing it was experiential.
Yeah.
And it was about kind of who you are, showing up here and now in the present moment, what you're feeling in your body, how you're relating to the other members of the group. They taught it in the way to represent how it is really, right? And I loved that. I found it was just very impactful.
I was reading a bit about it, like, and the people who listen all the time will know I try not to read too much about it because I'd like to learn from someone who knows what they're talking about. But there was talk, and you just mentioned there about being in the present moment.
Yeah.
And I always think of, like, people know that, like, if you're anxious, you're living kind of in the future. It's always like, and I know that feeling very well, where I'm always worried about what's coming. And when you're depressed, I think a lot of it, the time you could be living in the past and the kind of things that have upset you in the past, or the stuff that you've been through. We rarely think in the present. I think it's how difficult, even if when you were going through your training for it, how difficult was it for you to kind of try to zone in on the present?
I guess it's different at different times, right?
Yeah.
And we all have moments in our day when we can be engaged with what we're doing, and other moments when we might be miles away or in the future or the past. But there's something that in Gestalt, they say that when you arrive in the present moment, and anything that's with you in that moment, including your anxiety or your fears about the future, or, well, the thoughts about the memories from the past, they're all part of you too. they're all relevant. All the information that you need is right here. So whereas, say, some other therapies might kind of ask a lot about the past or the future and kind of go there, in Gestalt, we start with the present. Right? What do you notice right now? What's happening right now in your body? And that's where you start. And if there's, I'm feeling tension in my stomach, you might stay with it and see, what do you notice there? And if you allow yourself to be quiet and tune in with that really quietly, you might be able to find out a little bit more about that sensation. What is it saying to you? Does it have words? Does it have a form? And you can get to know yourself really very deeply just by focusing on the present moment, what's happening right now.
I've never been asked that, by the way, in therapy. I've never been asked. And we have a very good friend of the podcast, Tracy, who has been on a couple of times. She's a hypnotherapist. And I went once she said, come and have a go, because we were obviously talking about it on the podcast. I said, I've never been to it. And I said, it'd be interesting to find out. So she go, and I did try it, and I thought it was absolutely brilliant. It's funny what I was doing with that, though. With hypnotherapy, I wasn't, very ignorant on my part. I wasn't like seeing it as therapy. I was seeing like, I was like, even though therapy is in it, it's in the word.
Yeah.
I was having these things up here, like psychotherapy, all the ones that I suppose are, have been around hundreds of years, whatever. But when I went there, I never thought of it as therapy. But when I came out, I thought that was a proper session, because I did. You're saying about, this, like, even if you're thinking about the stomach or thinking about your breathing or whatever it might be, just thinking about, it's basically not thinking about the anxiety that you're going through or the depressed feelings. That's all it was. And I could focus and I could really relax. And when I came out, I thought I was in there for 12, 15 minutes, but I was in there for a full hour. And it was the idea of being, and that was me being in the present. And I think it may have been the only time I've been in the present for the last 20 years. It's funny, like, but I like what this, I like what you said also about, you're looking for the whole, whereas when I think of what, certain therapies that I've been through, or we've talked about certain therapies, when they focus on something, something that like happened in the past, whether it was somebody's, parents broke up or like someone's marriage dissolves or whatever it might be, and you're focused on that. But, there's other stuff going on. It's not just that. So I like the idea of it being the whole.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it's very kind of system approach where like it's all about. So you might have, okay, so the parents separated and that was going on, and what else? What else was happening, and who did you have to talk to at that time, and what about now? What is that triggering in the present moment? And then you from a Gestalt approach, take into consideration the many different systems, like your culture and your country and your heritage and the politics in the country where you live and what's going on and the environment and the whole planet that we live on. And there's like everything, every system impacts and shapes the systems within it and vice versa.
There's never a good time to put an advert in, but we're going to do it now. So you have a little drink of water and I'll get through this as best as I can. Okay. Fusion Training Centre, Monksland Athlone, a place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Centre or drop in for a chat. Fusion Training Centre, train like a warrior. I also want to point out that I have been coaching, for the last few weeks actually, I've been coaching a women's jiu-jitsu class with self-defense. It's going great. We've upped it to 2 times a week. If you are in the Athlone area and you want to try something new, give us a shout and we'll sort you out with a free session and see if you like it. There's no, by the way, some people came in and thought it was punching and kicking. There's no punching and kicking. It's just choking, by the way. That's all it is. But it's That makes it sound worse. But yeah, it's great fun, and the women who have been in there so far seem to be having a good time. They're coming back. I love coaching it, and yeah. So there you go. What is EMDR?
EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's a therapy that a woman named Francine Shapiro developed. She kind of discovered it, I would say. She was taking almost all her books start with this little scene from her life, how she discovered she was taking a walk through the park and some disturbing thoughts started coming to her mind. And as she walked, she noticed that the disturbance was going away. And she noticed that her eyes were moving left and right, watching the path where she was walking. And she was fascinated by this. And she was a researcher and a psychologist. And so she was already kind of on this path, but she started to dive in and explore. And she put a bunch of trials in place and did more and more randomized controlled trials to explore the effects of this eye movement. And she ended up developing this whole system of therapy called EMDR, which uses kind of what sort of defines it and how people know about it is this eye movement thing, or bilateral stimulation, which is left-right stimulation of the brain. That's the kind of, USP, I suppose, how people know about it. But there's so much more to it than that. It's a whole approach to working with our stuff, I suppose, our baggage, right? Will I go in a little bit more detail into?
No, yeah, because I want kind of, I suppose I have some like kind of follow-on questions from it. So, yeah, with the like, how does, I don't want to like kind of get too scientific, I suppose, like, but how does the eye tapping, is there eye movement and tapping? Is there tapping involved?
So there are a bunch of different ways that we can do bilateral stimulation through like audio. I use a platform that has plays tones in the ears, right? So it's left, right. You can get this kind of binaural sounds on Spotify. It's also left, right bilateral stimulation. Even walking is bilateral stimulation, but people are sometimes use tapping, left, right. It's not the same as EFT tapping, which is different. So it's left, right tapping. You can do this bilateral butterfly hug, it's called, in the chest, and the eye movement also. And there's slightly different effects with different. There's a bunch of research on the different techniques of bilateral stimulation. Go
on.
I can't remember what your question was.
No, it was just, I actually didn't put in the last word of my question. So it didn't actually, it was just a statement rather than a question. But so how does it, like, I've seen that it seems to help people with PTSD. There's studies of that. Like how does something like that, the eye movement, help with something that is quite like ingrained and I suppose can be quite severe too?
Yeah. It activates the brain in certain ways.
Okay.
And they are not sure exactly. I mean, this is still in ongoing research, but there are theories about the mechanisms, how the bilateral stimulation works. I suppose the way that I explain it to clients, if I share this with you, it kind of explains it in a way that is easier to understand, especially if you have a little bit of a sense of neuroscience, so when a trauma happens, and it doesn't have to be a trauma that's like, an obvious trauma that you would think of as a trauma, like a car crash or sexual abuse. It could be, when we are small, attachment is really important, right? And so it can be even a look from a caregiver or a certain face, a certain expression. These kind of things can be traumas too. Mm-hmm. And what we mean by trauma is really anything that is too much to digest at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's too much to digest, our brain, rather than processing it and digesting it the way we do our normal everyday experiences and laying it down into our long-term memory, it stays in its undigested form, which can include sensations, sensory information, emotions, the kind of raw data. And because it's not digested and laid down properly into long-term memory, it gets triggered. Right? It's like live electricity. So the really common triggering that people are aware of is, say, veterans who get triggered by banging noises, because that raw data, that sound of the bang, is similar to the banging that they heard of shots on the war field, right? So that information kind of gets that part of the brain, the neural network that holds that experience, it thinks it's still happening now. It's not laid down into the past, it's still live. And so that bang, that in a way, that part of the brain thinks we're there now, we're in the war field. And that's why people behave in a way that appears irrational when they get triggered, because part of their brain thinks that they are in this dangerous situation, right? And it's all happening again, and it's right here, right now. So that information, the way that it gets blocked in the synapses of the neural networks, right? The synapses are like the junctions between all these neural networks, of which we have billions. They get blocked, right? When something is too disturbing, they get blocked. And one of the things that bilateral stimulation does is it opens up those blockages so that the information can flow, energy can flow through the brain again. So what we do in EMDR is we first of all strengthen and enhance all the neural networks that contain the memories, the experiences that we have, that contain kind of feelings and experiences of safety and strength and a sense of knowing who we are, positive relationships that we've had. That information is all there, and we strengthen it. And then when we start bilateral stimulation, focusing on the trauma memory, they can finally connect. They can the trauma memory can get integrated with the rest of the brain, right, the rest of the nervous system, and to bring it to a state of health, proper digestion, right? It gets fully digested then.
It's amazing to hear the science behind it, obviously, as well, as because we can read stuff on a page, but I mean, when you hear someone talking about, and the reason how I found Rebecca, really, it was to do with EMDR, because a couple of people had mentioned that they'd done it, and then I thought, well, this is interesting. I know nothing about it. I want to find this out. So I Googled it. Rebecca came up on my search, happily. So since then, I've told a couple of people about it, and they've been fascinated to find out what it was about and, why it works. And I think that was a very good explanation of how it works for us. But
yeah, and if you like,
yeah,
I'm happy to go into more of what it's like as a client.
For sure, go for it. Yeah,
that makes sense to do that next.
Yeah, we can do that.
So what it's like as a client, and it can be different it is different for everybody.
Of course.
Just like any kind of therapy, it's different for different people. But what it seems to do is enable us to tap in to something that's kind of loaded and holds a lot of emotions and maybe distress. Right? These memories obviously contain distress, because otherwise they wouldn't have been locked away. But the process, the steps of EMDR ensure that we connect with these things from a place of orientation to the present moment. Right. So I'm here in the room with you, and I'm able to know that I'm safe right now. And then the therapist will ask questions, very specific questions, to activate that memory in a certain way, asking about the kind of the worst part of the memory, what's the picture that represents it, what are the beliefs that go with it, the emotions, the feelings in the body. And we highlight all of these, we activate all of these, and we start the bilateral stimulation. And like as a client, I've had this as a client myself. And I, you kind of, for some people, you replay the memory in your head, but knowing that you're here and safe, replay it in your head. It's not the same, by the way, as exposure therapy.
Yeah.
It's a bit different to that. You're here in the present moment, you're activating it, and the bilateral stimulation sort of activates your brain's digestive system in a way, right? It starts to process it, and you start to notice things that you didn't notice before, right? And you start to make a different meaning out of what happened. This is the case for many people. For some people, they may just notice physical sensations in their body and they change over time. Or for some people, big emotions come up and they feel the emotions and then they pass. For most people, I mean, I have done this with dozens and dozens of people, and I've never had an experience where it doesn't work, right? Sometimes there can be blockages or other kinds of blockages where a part of the system isn't ready to go there yet, and they jump in and stop us going there. That's where parts work comes in, and I'll talk about that later. But I think with everybody, it does something, right? We start to digest it, and then it starts to feel not so bad, right? It starts to, and as it gets digested and laid down into narrative memory, then we start to make sense of it, and it doesn't feel loaded anymore. And for some people, they need to step in to the past, right? Using imagination and rewrite the story, right? To give it a different ending, for example, let's say you got stuck somewhere, you weren't able to act in the way that you wanted to. You can go back into the memory and do whatever it is that you needed to do at the time and weren't able. That has a really healing effect. Even though it uses the imagination, it's the same substance as the memories.
Yeah.
The imagination is the same substance as the memories. So by the time you finish that, you know everything that happened the way it did historically, right? EMDR does not enable you to create a new story out of it, but you have a new feelings about it, right? It starts to make sense and fall into place. I'll give a really brief example. This was not a client of mine. This is can't remember some EMDR therapist who I heard on the podcast talking about. He was working with this man who'd been in a horrific car accident and lost his leg. And the therapist was like, even though he was confident in EMDR, I'm not going to be able to do anything for this guy. And the guy worked through this memory of this car crash, and the meaning that he made, the new way that he was able to tell the story by the end of the session was that he felt this huge gratitude to his leg, which had saved his life because he had been like caught under the vehicle and was taken along the road or something horrific. His leg, although he lost his leg, his leg kind of saved his life. Oh. And he was able to feel, and this is the kind of thing that if somebody tried to tell you, right, without digesting it yourself and coming to this meaning yourself, it wouldn't mean anything to you. You would just feel probably invalidated by them, right? Somebody tells you, why don't you just feel grateful to your leg for saving you?
Yeah.
Right. But the fact that he had come to this himself was transformative, right? he had made a new relationship with his trauma.
That's pretty amazing evidence of how it can work for people, I guess. You were very keen to talk about internal family systems.
Yeah.
I suppose the best thing to do is ask you to tell you tell us what that is.
So internal family systems is a way, it's okay. So I'll tell you how I told you how EMDR was discovered. I'll tell you how IFS was discovered. A guy called Richard Schwartz was working with very disturbed clients suffering from extreme eating disorders and self-harming and very high risk. And he was kind of trying to apply, he was working as a family therapist, family systems therapist. He was trying to apply this model, and he was saying, oh, if we manage to change the family, right, then this patient will get better. And he was finding it wasn't working, and he was getting stuck. And he started to just be curious and just be open and listen to them and hear what they were telling him. Mm-hmm. And he was hearing them telling him about different parts of them. And one part wants this and the other part wants that, and they're at war with each other and they're fighting and I have no mental peace. And he said about getting to know these parts. And over years, he created this model based on his experience with clients. And it's been kind of refined over the years. And there's this whole therapy now that's becoming extremely popular. Every single training that they open is highly oversubscribed. They have to have a lottery system to give people places on their trainings. And my understanding of that is, and from my personal experience, it just fits. Not for everybody, but for many people. When they hear about this and they start looking at themselves through this lens, they go, yeah, that makes sense. That fits for me. It's like, I have different parts of me that want different things. And the model is wonderful because it's so non-pathologizing.
Right.
It sees that everybody is having parts, right? So some trauma therapies see parts as being a result of trauma, mm-hmm. but IFS sees parts as being just the way humans are made up, right? Like we have a nervous system, and different sort of elements of our nervous system shows up in different ways psychologically, like, for example, the fight and flight response. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those different needs or urges of the nervous system contradict each other.
Yeah.
And when there is trauma, when there is more extreme trauma, parts are more and more polarized with each other. And that leads to mental ill health.
Okay.
Right. So you can actually map all of the psychological disorders using parts language to make sense of what they represent in terms of parts.
You thought it might be interesting to do a demo?
Yeah.
And I said, okay.
Yeah, would you go for that?
I think we should. I think it's because, look, you mentioned just before we were talking, like, you could answer the questions I have up, but it would be, obviously people will find out more exactly what it is if they can hear the process of it. So I think we should do that. So now you are the host now. I pass over the baton. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Very courageous of you. So let's see. What are you interested in getting to know more about in yourself? I'm
always interested in figuring out, or at least learning more about my anxiety. Because I've always, like, I shouldn't say I've always had it, but I've had it for a long number of years, but it's the ever present, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I want to speak to your whole system for a moment, because you are obviously making yourself really vulnerable and in a kind of position of being exposed here in this setting. And so I want to reassure all of your system that we won't go anywhere that you don't feel comfortable going, that you don't want to go. And if at any point it feels like it's getting close to, no, this is crossing over some line for me, you can just let me know and we'll pull back.
Okay.
There's plenty we can do that won't feel like too much.
Okay.
So first of all, I want to check if there's any parts of you, if you can get a sense, if you want to get to know more about your anxiety, are there any parts of you that don't? Any parts of you that are afraid of doing that or have any concerns or worries?
I think I feel everything I think most people in the gut.
Yeah.
And I think I feel the anxiety most in the gut, and also not wanting to find out about it in the gut as well.
Yeah, that's great to notice that. So let's see if the parts of you that are letting you know through your gut that they experience anxiety, and the ones that don't want you to know or us to know more about your anxiety, see if you can just notice them there now. And let's see if they have any needs or requests in order to help this feel a little bit safer for them.
Probably a few deep breaths, I would imagine at this stage. Yeah. So I'll take a few deep breaths.
So let's do that together.
Okay.
Taking a few breaths and letting those parts of you feel your breath, and in the process of breathing, see if they can notice that they're not alone in there, right? There's the you that's breathing, that's aware of your breath.
I mean, it always helps me the breathing.
Yeah, wonderful. So
yeah, I can kind of feel a bit in my arms as well. It seems like it's moving around a bit. I'm talking about the anxiety now, by the way, rather than anything else. But
how's the part that doesn't want you to know about the anxiety?
I mean, it seems that the stomach seems a bit lighter. That seems to be, I don't know if that's the use of the breathing, which I use for anxiety anyway, or whether it's the part of me that doesn't want me to know.
See if you can ask inside.
Okay.
Is there permission from that part that doesn't want you to know about the anxiety? Is there permission for us to get to know a little more about the anxiety here?
I think we can push ahead and get to know a little bit more.
Okay. So that might be another part that's coming in and saying,
okay.
Oh,
yeah.
This will be more interesting for our listeners.
Yeah, maybe.
If we go with let's go deeper, let's go. So let's acknowledge that part that wants this to be interesting, right? And just take a moment and see if it's okay to check inside. And if the part that doesn't want you to know about the anxiety feels like it's still strong and still present, we get to know that part.
I don't think it's as strong as it was now when we initially brought it up. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's thank it for its permission.
Okay.
And then bring attention towards the anxiety in whatever way it shows up for you, right? Whether it's sensations in the arms and the gut. Just notice what's there. See if there's any image that goes with it or thoughts. See what other information shows up when you just notice the anxiety. That's the word that you're used to associating with it. But what else is it? What is it like?
I think what happens is like this kind of it's not like it's not a racing mind as in my thoughts are racing, but it's like there's something that's, a little bit of a scramble going on, kind of, here in this part of my head, that seems to just kind of zigzag all over the place, as if it's this kind of panic stations going on up there without much of a thought process to it.
Yes. So this kind of sub-thought kind of panic going on, a bit of rushing. So see if it's okay to notice that now. Noticing that kind of rushing, that sensation here in the forehead. And around the eyes, I think, is that?
Yeah,
around the eyes and the forehead. And as you notice it, knowing that you are not that anxiety, or you are not those sensations, how do you feel towards that?
I think I'm good at calming it, but I have to be very focused on it.
Yeah.
It's I talked about it a few weeks ago, but this hyper focus on that particular thing. So if it is the gut, I have to be fully concentrated on the gut. If it's up here, I have to be I can't, if it's happening in my gut and my head, I have to pick one. But at the moment, it's not as scrambled as it was now that I'm focusing on it a bit more.
Yeah. Does it feel like there's a part of you who's quite used to managing that anxiety, kind of keeping it controlled?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's send a little appreciation to that part. It probably enables you to function and feel more at ease.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And let's see if that one who's used to keeping the anxiety down is willing to let you get to know it a little more now. And it might have a fear that if it stops doing what it does, the anxiety will get out of hand. And we can let the anxiety know that we're here to get to know it, and it doesn't need to shout so loudly right now, because we're here to get to know it. And if it's willing to tone down a little its intensity, that will help the other part that's trying to control it and manage it to relax a little, so there'll be more space so we can get to know it more.
Yeah, I suppose this is the difficult part, because of the fear of, I mean, it is a fear of, if you do allow yourself to, handle it a little less, maybe, or not, that's probably the wrong way of putting it, but let it go a little bit, that if you lose that sense of control, what comes next? Like, it could be, you've got these images in your mind of like absolute carnage coming next, and that's not, it's not a, it's a worrying thing, I suppose.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like the part that's used to managing the anxiety is showing you that it's terrified there will be carnage if it doesn't do its job.
Yeah.
And so let's stay with that bit a little longer. If this was a full therapy session, we would spend more time, much more time, getting to know this part of you, which we would call a manager. Our managers help us to function by keeping a whole load of stuff in check.
Yeah.
Right. By managing our lives, by controlling things, including our own emotions and our own responses to things. Right. And do you want to go a little further, or do you want to kind of begin to see what feels right for you?
I want to kind of do both, but I'm also aware of, I'm aware that we're doing, like, it's in the middle of a podcast, but I really want, if you don't mind, I want to just highlight something there that kind of happened while we were talking about it, because so I can, when I'm particularly anxious, and I could feel, sometimes it's my gut, sometimes it's my arm, and sometimes it's my head. They tend to be, we'll say they're the main three parts that can be affected. I've never thought deeply about, you say, like, allowing it, giving something permission, I guess. I've never thought about like giving something permission to kind of go deeper with something. But when you said about that, and I gave it the permission, it moved. Now, I've never had that before. I've been, anxiety for 20 years or something. I've never been able to have that move from one place to the other with my own thoughts. Like, it's never. And what was interesting again about it was when it moved to the arms, that's when my head started scrambling. But I was wondering, was I so kind of flustered by the fact that this just moved from here to here that my head was, or was it you know what I mean? Was it the anxiety, or was I just freaked out by the fact that I was able to, with your help, move it from my gut to my arms?
Yeah.
It was like, even in the few minutes that we just did there, like that's, and I hope everybody can, like, I'm a bit freaked out, I'll be honest, right? I hope everybody can kind of, I hope I'm putting that out there, that, like, you know, at least verbally, that's a very strange thing for that to happen, you know?
Yeah. If we knew each other better and this was a proper therapy session, then I would be really encouraging you to name everything that comes up, every reaction that you have. And that, you know, if you were to let me know, okay, so that thing moved and that freaked me out and I don't know, and now I have this confusion going on here and that feels in my forehead and that feels now I'm trying to figure it out, then we could explore, sounds like another part's coming in that's trying to make sense of what's happened, or it's confused or flustered by what's happened, right? And we work with each part as they arise, right? And if any part is if it's willing to relax and trust this process, then it'll step back and we'll carry on with the part we were working with before.
Yeah.
But if the part is not, if it's really frightened, we stay with that, right? And we help it and we support it. And it's a very powerful approach that gets us in really deep, really quickly, to get to know all these things that are going on. And we find out that what we thought was anxiety, like a kind of a blanket thing, there's loads of different parts going on in there. And there's a part that tries to control and manage the anxiety. And sometimes that is as much of the difficulties that you experience as the thing itself, right? And when we get in deeper, we can eventually find out the root of the anxiety. What does it need from you in the first place? What is it carrying?
I'm a little bit like, emotional is probably a word for it, but because I didn't tell you before this, but I've been kind of extra anxious the last few days, and this is something that comes, you know, like sometimes, like, it could be 2 weeks of regular anxiety, and then it might be a little bit higher. And I've only been talking to one of my friends about it because, you know, I don't want to tell everybody everything every time. I sometimes, like, you know, but so I have been like a little bit anxious, and I focus on stuff like this podcast, you know, like, when's the next episode, what I'm doing, and that's been great. That's the brilliant thing about the podcast for that. But that was a very strange and a positive experience there because of the last few days. And, you know, I've read books about anxiety, and I've read books about how we try to deal with it. And I do my own thing. I exercise. I do all the things that I should do, and try to avoid the things I shouldn't. But that was a very particularly powerful thing, that the shift there, that particular shift. And I'm actually probably going to look back on this podcast when we sign off, so I can see myself reacting to it, whether it's only in minor, you know, minute details on my face, but I knew when it happened. So I'd like to say, obviously, I want to say thanks for allowing, you know, me that little bit of a space to do it. And
Thank you for your bravery. It was really,
that's all right. But this is obviously something that you really enjoy, helping people.
I really enjoy this work. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, I feel like I provide a space for people to get to know themselves more deeply.
And the calming, you've a very calming voice that you slip into very well when you need, not that you're loud and brash outside of that, but you know what I mean? There's this like, like, I'm speaking my own experience, that I have to relate to that too, because to allow me to relax and to allow me to open up as much as possible, the voice is such a key thing, you know, because whether I'm looking at you or not, it doesn't matter whether you're in the room or whether you're online. I need to be able to that has to kind of make me feel comfortable before I can start opening up to it. I think it's very important, voice.
That's right. because our nervous systems are wired to be constantly picking up on the other nervous systems around us. Right?
Yeah.
And when our nervous systems tune in with each other, there's information there about how safe this setting is, this person is, right? How regulated they are. Right? If somebody is very dysregulated or bringing their own worries and concerns, then your nervous system picks up on that and will go like, oh, is there danger around? Right? There's a kind of a magnetic resonance that happens where we can help each other to become more regulated, co-regulated.
Absolutely. Do you like, because I had Cleona on last week and she was talking about coaching online, and do you enjoy that side of things? I know, like, it opens up a lot of possibilities, I guess.
Yeah, I really like working online. I find there's many pros to it. Mm-hmm. I know that it's not the same as being in the room together, but for me, the pros kind of well outweigh the cons. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the work that I do, as you've experienced, you could have your eyes closed, right? So you can go inside, and for many people, when they're sitting in their own room at home, they feel more safe than if they had to go out into the world and get buses or find parking and navigate. And there's so many practical reasons why online works great, as long as you have a stable internet connection. Right? And good technology, so you can see each other and hear each other clearly. For me, it's been really great. There's been very few cons to it.
I like that idea, and someone had mentioned it before of being in your own space is huge, because how much more comfortable you can be, like whether you're just lying on your bed, sitting on your couch, whatever it is, there's a comfort to it, and like you say, you don't have to like drag yourself off the couch to get into on a bus and stuff, and all of that kind of stuff. That we joked about this question a bit, but what do you like to do in your spare time, if you have any?
Oh yeah, I don't have much of that. Things I used to like that I try to find time for. I like running. Mm-hmm. I like walking in the mountains. I like the sea. I like cooking and baking. Used to be really into baking, but don't have so much time for that now. And reading. I haven't read a novel in probably a year or two. Now it's all textbooks.
Yeah.
Where I'm at professionally, but I like reading.
Very
movies.
Relaxing stuff, like they're all like, whether you're outside obviously with running and walking, it's all mindful, relaxing, kind of things. Like, and even reading, I guess not so much with textbooks, but novels, like you can put your feet up and chill out, and same as films as well, I suppose. It's all good, positive stuff. So, but where can people find you, Rebecca?
They can look on my website, RebeccaO'Callaghan.com.
I will put a pin up that a post up. I know you are very busy and you've got people lined up, but that doesn't mean that somebody can't go and have a look, sign up and get in the queue, like if they can. If this is something that sounds something helpful for them, and you got to see some of it at work there today, which is the first time we've done that actually on the podcast, where we've allowed to have that little bit of therapy between the host and the guest, and it was very nice to hand over my host to you as well. But Rebecca, you've been an incredible guest, very insightful, and thank you for opening me up to something that was like I said, very emotional and very, very thought-provoking.
Yeah, I'd love to have a whole hour to help you get to know your parts a little more.
I know.
Maybe another time.
I know, but we really needed to talk about, well, especially EMDR, because people were asking me about that.
Yeah.
But
just to name that, I normally use all of these approaches together.
Okay, all right. So
it's not like you have to sign up for EMDR or IFS or Gestalt. I kind of use them all in an integrated way mostly.
Oh, right. Okay. That's even better again. Rebecca, stick with me for 2 seconds. I just want to sign off. I want to get a quick photo, and then we're out of here.
Okay, great.
I have to thank John for doing all the tech stuff that I can't do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would, or on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and all the podcast platforms, all the usual ones: Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts. Thanks to everyone for watching and for listening today. And once again, Rebecca, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will see you all next week. Take care of yourselves. Bye.